Welcome back to Pardon Our Trench, guys. I am Hannah, and today I'm going to be talking about archaeology and COVID and the pandemic right now. If we ever had any chance to monetize this video, it is gone now. So, let's get into it. Firstly, disclaimer, I'm mostly going to be talking about archaeology in academia, not archaeology and kind of like CRM work and stuff like that, because that is still going on to a degree. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but for the most part today I'm going to be talking about academic archaeology because that's just in my wheelhouse. It's what I know best. Let's just jump into it. Obviously, with travel restrictions and social distancing and governments being kind of preoccupied at the moment, archaeology is very much been affected by this pandemic, and who knows how long it's going to be before things kind of can get back to normal. So firstly, and most obviously, let's talk about the travel restrictions that can play into anyone who's an undergrad wanting to go to a field school this summer, all the way through somebody who's been doing research in the field for 30 plus years and doesn't live in the area that they study, so they now can't get to their dig site. If you're lucky enough to have already lived in the area that you're actually doing field work in, you can still continue it. You have to abide, obviously, by social distancing practices. But if you don't live in the area that you're studying, you have to wait until things open back up again and you're able to actually get back out to your site. Another thing to point out about the travel bans is actually something quite interesting that's happened. Because of the lack of travel, there's been a severe lack in tourism in a lot of major sites like Petra. They've actually been able to switch over to much needed conservation that's not usually able to happen when there's a whole bunch of tourists there every day. Also means you have less funding though, because they don't have as much of the tourism income coming in, but that work is slowly but surely being done on a little less of a budget, but definitely a necessary thing that often major sites don't have the time and ability to do. We still have a lot of governments and museums and a lot of institutions are going to be very slowed down by dealing with other things that are more important at the moment. So even once travel bans kind of get lifted to the point where archaeologists can go out into the field, unless they already have all of the paperwork necessary and all of the permissions that they needed, they're really not going to be able to do work for a while. There are a lot of other things that archaeologists are doing in the meantime, which is, I think, a lot of the time we have this predisposition, even as archaeologists, because it's the best part of our job, to just constantly be thinking about archaeology as digging. But in reality, even when things aren't in a pandemic, most of the time that you spend isn't actually digging. Most of the time that you're spending in archaeology is research before you go out into the field, research continuing after you're in the field, and lab work with all of the artifacts that you've already uncovered. All of these things can still be done during a pandemic, and a lot of archaeologists have shifted to doing more research, and you have the ability to digitize your collections. You have the ability to clean off the things that you haven't cleaned yet and conserve and do all of this work that maybe isn't as exciting, but definitely you have the capability of still functioning as an archaeologist during this time, which is really great news. For a lot of graduate students, I think this has hit probably the hardest, because a lot of their research isn't where they are. Unless you're very, very lucky, you're usually not studying and doing your thesis research on an area that is directly next to the school that you're going to. So a lot of schools thankfully have taken this into account and are considering extending out the deadlines for those students in order for them to be able to go back into the field and still have enough time to continue writing their dissertations. Speaking of graduate students, field schools also are still kind of up in the air depending on this field school. Most field schools for this summer, especially if they're in June or July, have definitely halted until next year. So for example, Santa Sara in Spain, which Carla did this last summer, their digs are in early summer usually, and so they've completely halted for the rest of the year, and they'll be opening back up hopefully next year when things are better. But there are some other field schools that are held later in the year, such as a Transylvania bioarchaeology field school that is still waiting it out and seeing how things play out because they are closer to fall. So it really depends on the field school that you're going to right now and the field school that you've signed up for and when it is. But obviously a lot of field schools kind of have this understanding at this point that they might have to cancel until things get better. And UCI has actually personally had this happen. The I Dig UCI class that was supposed to be held for this term got canceled. So a lot of you, especially if you were already signed up for the class, have felt the effects of this, even if you weren't necessarily planning on going to a field school this summer. Things have kind of had to shift a little bit, and so instead of actually being in the field, a lot of educational things like field schools and field classes like the I Dig UCI class have shifted to an online format. And so if you were planning on going onto a field school this summer, do not despair. There are still things that you can do to learn. A lot of field schools are doing kind of online learnings like this, and a lot of field schools and a lot of archaeological firms are actually doing things like that in the meantime to kind of just teach you about archaeology, even if you're kind of new to the field. In the meantime, because a lot of us have a lot more time on our hands and we're looking to kind of fill it with fun things, and what's more fun than archaeology? Even if field schools are still open, they do have to abide by social distancing at all times. So that means in the field while you're digging, that means transport, that means while you're staying wherever they put you up to stay. So it is quite complicated right now, but hopefully it will get a little better. A lot of CRM work and stuff that's still going has to abide by. So there are still some archaeology jobs and some things that are still continuing, but you do have to abide by those social distancing policies and constantly be wearing a mask and gloves, which, you know, the mask might come in handy so you're not inhaling dust all day, but, you know, what's the fun in not having mud in your lungs? Lastly, social distancing actually is kind of already built into some archaeologies. The only thing in archaeology that I can really pinpoint that is still going strong today because the social distancing is already built into it is actually surface surveys, because you already have to be a certain number of meters apart from each other to be able to walk the field. So maybe it's time to look into some surface surveys. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope that everyone is staying safe. I know that pandemic has affected all of us in multitudes of ways, some more than others, and I hope that all of you and your family and your loved ones are doing okay and finding ways to pass the time, such as learning about archaeology. Have a great day, guys. Bye.